Good evening, everyone, and welcome to all of you to this Executive Diary series that we're launching, powered by AWS. And here we are going to be bringing you some of the top minds in our country and discuss on what the future is going to be, what are some of the signals that we should capture. And today, the first session we are starting with is getting deep into SaaS and the time of Indian businesses going big, global SaaS businesses is now. So with that, we can't ignore anymore, and the conversation can't be on hinges as we see big noises and big attention to consumer internet businesses. I think the time for getting SaaS to mainstream is now. In this Executive Diary series, today we have some of the very significant, important people from our ecosystem who are here to share with us some very real insights as they build their businesses, as they are in their own ways raising the flag of Indian SaaS businesses and startups. Shekhar, I'm very excited to be talking to you today because all of us in India, in the startup ecosystem, will agree with me that you're the undisputed voice when it comes to championing, supporting the SaaS entrepreneurs, startups in our country. And I've spoken to so many entrepreneurs, and they tell me that if he gives a feedback or if he suggests something, it makes so much. It makes like a delta of a difference in the way they are building their products, their SaaS journeys. And then thank you today for agreeing to talk to us. I'm sure everyone will be looking forward to what you have to say. And then with this,
thank you for that.
Yeah. And
now,
with this,
I think,
I'll start.
So this, I think you're putting way ahead of where we are today in the ecosystem. The one good news about the SaaS ecosystem, which I want to say, is that not only me, but everyone, every entrepreneur has a what I call as a pay forward mentality, all the way from the leaders to mid-level, even somebody who's just started. Whatever they have learned are sharing with others, and that community feel that everybody let's help each other to become big is key, and that is the speciality of the whole SaaS community in India, and I'm kind of a part of that ecosystem.
Thank you, and I think that's very generous of you to say that, because I want to go on record to say this, that I've seen you very closely from many years back before SaaS was buzzing. I know how, without qualms, with a lot of humility, you've given feedback and you've listened to entrepreneurs. And I was one of them who was all over the place and still is, but you listened and told me to go in a certain way. And thank you today that we are having this conversation. So with this, let me begin with the first question. You've said, and I quote, "We anticipate several billion-dollar companies will be created from India in the next decade." Talk to us what excites you about India and the startups that you're seeing, because you've been saying this, you've been at it before anyone else could, own this thing. So tell us what excites you about India and the Indian entrepreneurs and the SaaS ecosystem.
It's a great question. Thanks for reminding. To be precise, this was, I think, around 14, 15, 16 when we started saying that, in fact, in 16, we did a Google Axel SaaS report where we said, there will be several billion-dollar companies will be there. And in the next 10 years, which is by 2025, we will have, $10 billion of revenue coming out of SaaS companies in India, and $50 billion of market cap. So that was our kind of prediction. I would say, I was naive and completely wrong about this prediction. I would say I should have said, instead of $1 billion, tens of billion-dollar companies will be born out of India in the next 10 years. I almost think we're going to break this 50 billion market cap very soon, and probably 100 billion is a new prediction, I would say, from India companies. So you will see more, not just $1 billion, $10 billion companies coming out of India. And two, we will cross 100 billion value definitely by 2025, based on what I see and how I feel about the market. To the question you said, why do I feel so bullish, and what
Mm.
makes these things possible? When I started investing in SaaS in 2011 as part of Axel. And I used to beg people to look at SaaS startups, and people said everybody was interested in consumer, B2B fintech, but very, very few in SaaS was like leftover. And even after I investing, if the companies are doing well, I have to literally go around with other investors saying, please do follow on. People wouldn't touch the follow on. So we have to go outside India to bring follow on investors. But now is a complete different story. If you look at the last, I would say 7-8 years, quality of entrepreneurs, exemplary. Thanks to our, as
Yeah.
I said, pay forward, quality of entrepreneurs who are thinking about it and understanding about it, and confidence that I can build
Yeah.
global companies. That's one change. Fundamentally, you see it.
Mm.
Secondly, the problems people are picking. Before, people used to pick only the problem they would see in India around them, highly local problems. But now people are thinking, global. World is my oyster. I'm going to pick a problem that I can solve worldwide, and not afraid of going head on with Valley or Europe or London. So, I'm going to build a company of world class and fight in a world class arena and build a massive company. That's a second change. And the third change is the access to capital. Thanks to Freshworks, Postman, Browser Stack, some of the scale companies in India, the world is watching it and saying that, hey, there's something about in the air or in the water of these Indian entrepreneurs coming out of India who are producing world-class companies, and money is starting to flow. So with these three, it's a perfect combination for especially post COVID. If we get time, we can talk about it, for SaaS companies to build and flourish and actually accelerate.
Yeah, so true. Shekhar, I was speaking to the founder of Postman, and I really liked the ambition he had. Like, his thing was that why can't we be the best product from India, which everyone, it's not on the fringes, but it's like a mainstay for everyone across the world. So,
Yes,
yeah, and I
yes.
know you've been saying this from 2011. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So that I think is the new way of thinking. And the other part I want to bring is, people don't understand the power of SaaS. It's a very repeatable business, highly predictable, and you operate at 80% gross margin. What it means is, if you sell a software at $100, it only costs you $20 to serve that customer. Remaining $80 is there for you to pay for your employees, your office, your beautiful lunch, and anything you want to do. Whereas India-based businesses, you are selling at $100, it costs you like at least $90 to serve. What is left is very $10. So you need a lot more money to raise, a lot more fighting, a lot more competition. But in the SaaS, if you get it right, it is just a phenomenal business model. And as entrepreneurs and the market is understanding, I'm hoping and expecting that more and more SaaS companies will get invested and started in India.
Yeah, yeah. Shekhar, I was speaking to an investor, a very prolific investor from China, and he was saying that now is the time for SaaS because large consumer internet businesses have been built, and the derivative is that now we need the whole SaaS ecosystem. And in that context, I want to understand from you, because to me and to all of us who are watching, you are, one of the most forward thinkers when it comes to building SaaS businesses. What are some of the opportunities or sectors, if I may say so, which you think are there and which will proliferate? And also, what are some of the things you see are leading to this
Yeah.
growth, to this demand?
Yeah, so excellent question. So, I think sectors is one of the axes. The way to
Hmm.
think about SaaS businesses is, I think there are four axes. The very first axis is, what function of a company, because remember, SaaS is almost always you're selling to somebody else, an enterprise. So what function in an enterprise you are targeting? Is it every employee, like an HR product? or is it sales, or it is marketing, or it is finance, or it is legal, or it is developers, product teams. So every company has these several functions, right? 10 to 12 functions. Is my product being built for everybody or a specific function? That is the first axis.
Hmm.
The second axis is the size of the customer. Is it a prosumer, like a small company, like, people running like 5, 10 people agencies? Is it prosumers,
Hmm.
individual users, a small company, or a mid-sized company, or a large one, or a giant enterprises? There are like another axis. People have to think about in which type of customer I want to go after. The third one is what you call as sector, the domain, right? Am I building it for education, media, healthcare, finance, or retail, or for other software companies or manufacturing companies, logistics, massive markets. Healthcare itself is 17% of GDP in the US. Anything you touch, you can still build massive companies there, right? So this is like massive. The fourth one to think about is the axis of region. Am I building for India? Am I building for India plus Southeast Asia? Or am I building it for US, Europe, India, Southeast Asia? You have to pick. So now in this four axis, you draw it out. Probably, you get, I think, at least 100 to 150 nodes. In each of the
Hmm.
node, you can build $1 billion to multi-billion-dollar companies. So it's about picking your battle in where you want to be and identifying that market and hammering it out so that you be the best at what you are doing. And that's what it is about. So all these sectors are wide open and especially accelerated now with COVID, because post COVID, everyone, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's transportation, everybody's digitizing, which means
Yeah.
they need tools. And the tools acceleration is massive, and we are seeing many of our companies actually accelerate during COVID time faster than what they had predicted.
Yeah, and that brings me to the question, which I'm sure every entrepreneur would like to hear from you, is when somebody is in India building a SaaS business, they want you as a mentor, advisor, investor, and they want Axel to invest. So I want to ask you, Shekhar, what is your investment strategy when you look at investing in a SaaS business? And
Yeah.
then, yeah, and then what's the thesis?
Yeah. So if you look at the thesis of investing and how Axel fits in, Axel is a very early stage investor. We invest in seed and early stage, which means very young companies. And when we are investing, if you look at all our investments, like Freshworks, when we put our first check, it was 6 employees.
Hmm.
Charge B was like just very early on. Zenoti, Mindtickle, every one of the companies now they're starting to scale in India. We were the first check writers. We invested very early on. So when we're investing early on, it's looking at the team and their passion about the problem they're trying to face. And what we can do is we spend a lot of time, what is called as a prepared themes in Excel. So we think about categories which are forming, where there will be a lot of companies that would come, and is there an opportunity for sitting in India for somebody to win. So those
Hmm.
theses is what kind of we spend a lot of time on, and that's what we have used. Like for example, initially in 11 and 12 we said SaaS is very important. We built an invested in set of companies.
Hmm.
Then we said, hey, vertical SaaS is more important. In vertical SaaS, wellness industry, we invested in Zenoti. Dental industry, we have invested in CareStack. Facilio is in the real estate prop tech industry. So in vertical industries, which are massive, by the way, we are investing in these things. So what has been our now most recent is in the developer tools. We have invested in a company called AppSmith, which is building a developer tool for young developers to build apps very quickly. And they are getting already just launched about 2 months back. They're already getting customers. It's an open source based approach, getting from 50 countries.
Wow.
So like things are moving fast. And if you look at the teams again, dreams, global markets, every developer across the world. So if you look at all these theses, pick a function, go deep, and look for edge you would get out of India, and support them. So we are as much prepared as much founders are. When founders come and talk to us, that enriches our knowledge as well, and so we work with them and figure out the categories that are exciting. But in general, for me, any tech company that is disrupting any markets where they have some insights about that market is a perfect candidate to get so Axel's money.
Yeah. I'm going to quote this that you've tweeted. Love the story of ChargeBee, but I like the context. What you said is our thesis: back founders at seed level, building global SaaS startups, take advantage of India presence, learn the nuances of the global market, be obsessed with execution.
Sure. Yeah.
I thought it sums up so brilliantly. like, uh, uh, you know, but to me again this is a very interesting question, and there's no right answer to this. Is that how do you figure out that this is the founding team that will be able to execute? Have you over the years figured that out, and do you have a playbook on that?
I won't call a playbook, hunch. We're starting to get the hunch about that part. See, the part that I see is, on the one flip side, there are really awesome founders really looking at that part, but there are a lot of founders who are started because startup is being a fashion today, right? And that difference between them is what I'm looking for. It's not about whether your credibility as a background of which company you work for, or which education institute you went, or what you know, what you don't know. The foundations are, markets are very, 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 very shrewd. They don't care which IIT you went to. If you don't
Yeah.
build a world-class product, it doesn't matter, right? So how, when we look at the things, it's really, really important I'm looking for is how much have they spent time with the customer, market, and the problems.
Hmm.
That is the first gauge. If I know about their customer more so than the founder, I would say less likely I'm going to invest, because I'm a part-time. I'm working with 20 companies. I'm only spending a little bit of time. If I know more about that customer than the founder hasn't done their job. As simple as that. So if a founder's team cares about the market, they should have spoken to hundreds of people there, understood how the market
Hmm.
operates, what are the
Hmm.
nuances, what's the competition, why there is a timing is right now, and that commitment and effort is very much
Hmm.
essential, because you're trying to change a way of being business with a new entrant with absolutely no money, no brand, no product, and you have to make it big. And only
Yeah.
way is you need to have some superpowers. And superpowers come by spending time with the customers and around them and the experts in that ecosystem. That's the first part. Once you have that part, then becomes very visible and obvious when you talk to the founders, whether they have done their homework or they have not done.
Very, very insightful and so true. Shekhar, I have to tell you this, that most of the portfolio companies, your portfolio companies with whom you work, they all have to say that when you come for the meetings, right, then they feel that you're a true partner who adds value rather than critiquing, or rather than coming from like, hey, I'm the investor. You actually come and add value and perspective, to think differently, to do differently. And I think that also in some way answers the founder investor fitment, which I
Yes.
think is a two-way street.
Yes.
And that comes in the way you also evaluate investing in the founders, if I may say so.
Yeah. So there are two ways to think about this. In very early stage, it's a formative years. You
Hmm.
know, I also don't have answers. So does the founders also don't have the answers. The question then comes is how, once post investment, we are on the same side of the table. We will, as Axel, will not make money if the company doesn't succeed. There's no other motive. Is to say you have to build a world-class company. As simple as that, right? Our intents are all aligned. So now the question then comes down to is how the founder and investor work together to make it big. And it's a discovery path. So nobody knows the answer. So how do we define hypothesis? How do you set up experiments? And how do we try out and give an honest attempt at these things? And one characteristic, you asked me about the founder characteristics, one characteristics I've learned over the years that makes this difference is what I call is learnability.
Hmm.
Everybody is learning. And if you
Hmm.
want to grow 2x, if I'm making $1 million revenue, next year I have to make 2 million. after that 4 million, I have to grow 2x every year. Guess what? Founder has to learn probably 3x. If they're slow learners and they think that I know all and I'm at the center, nothing else matters to me, then it's bound to fail. Because the more you know, more you don't know. And as you spend more time with your customers, competition, markets, learning, and you have to enjoy that learning process. And you have to enjoy the
Yeah.
process of reflection. And out of 10 experiments, only 5 or 6 succeeds, 2, 3 fail. Our job is to reduce number of failures and get the right experiments. If they work, double down on those and just continue to expand. You pick the right problem, you pick the right market, you get the right team, and put your full heart into it. And that's what I call as execution. So then you're going in the right direction, and in a market that is massive, because the rest will be just translating investors' money into ARR.
Yeah. Ma'am, what I'm picking up is the most beautiful line that you said, the honest attempt.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. Yeah. Shekhar, tell us about the Scale platform which Axel has launched. Tell us what you're doing over there.
Yeah. So this is as one more initiative from Axel from a pay forward basis, seed to scale. This is a platform we have created, which is got a website and a lot of content. What at least we started realizing is, when we started, we have seen a lot of growth and scale companies operating at a massive scale now. But at the same time, we invest in very early stage companies. Right now, I'm sitting on the board of BrowserStack and Freshworks, and the conversations there, if I look at them, the benefit of that happened 5 to 7 years back when the company was small and made some choices.
Yeah.
So bringing those insights of what we are learning from the big companies and the decisions we made early on, or the founders made early on, bringing back to the seed company so that they can understand why these things matter. And that is what we are trying to bring, because you don't want the train to stop. Once the train is moving and momentum is picked up, the worst thing for a startup is the train stopping or slowing down. So you don't want that to happen. Means you have to make choices, and these strategic choices are always beneficial. So, and surprisingly, the questions you answer at a scale company, pre-IPO company, or a big company to an early stage are actually very, very similar, but they're more nuanced, and bringing those contexts back into a seed company. So the seed to scale is our platform to bring best of our learnings as an entry point for entrepreneurs in India and hopefully globally. And that's where people can start to kind of get to understand some workshops we run, then we run roundtables, we run content, we run podcasts, and we have speakers. So many of the initiatives we are trying to do within Axel, just open it up. And it's not just for Axel companies. We are working with all successful, high quality founders who are willing to share with us and bring them into the platform.
Wow. So it's called seed to scale.
Seed to scale. Yeah.
Seed to scale. Okay. One question I have to ask you, and this I'm sure is a question of, which you would have got before, is that we've seen so many interesting businesses being built out of India, and now we've seen such scale in SaaS. Why do you think we don't have enough IPOs? Enough is a nice word.
But correct. Good question. So see, I think you have to understand the basics again of the IPO versus non-IPO. So what is this? IPO is you're trying to raise money from the public, which is in a regulated market. If you're raising from the US, you're going to list in NASDAQ or in New York Stock Exchange. If you're raising in India, you have to kind of list under the guidelines of SEBI, right? That is the public market guidelines. But what is happening is, earlier people used to raise at $1 billion to $2 billion valuations, and would raise between $150 to $200 million, so that 20% new stocks will be issued, and and then operate as a public company. But what has happened is, in private markets today, raising 100, 200, 250 million is not a challenge. What used to happen before is, I go to public market because I don't have private market to raise money from. But the private markets are willing to finance you up to $5-10 billion of valuations today. And why private market raise is very straightforward, simple, and doesn't kind of make my company very constraining in the sense that I'm kind of not under the control of regulation, compliance, and the things that I'm expected to be as a public company. So people are delaying that, especially in the SaaS side, so that they build more mass, more giant revenue streams, more compliance, repeatable processes internally. So when they go list, they can maintain and build very durable, iconic companies that will last, 20, 30, 40 years. So that is the way people are thinking. And therefore you're seeing, continuing to raise at a much higher valuations and delay as much as possible. And they kind of go IPO when they think they're ready to go IPO.
Yeah. Do you think the next 5 years we will see that in the next 5 years?
Absolutely. You will start seeing, companies coming out of India. Now there are already I would say six unicorns in India. I would say if there are 10 plus, at least unicorns if they go and raise money right now. Six have raised and 4 to 5 are yet to raise. Easily 10 plus. Many of them are on a path to decacorns. And if I look at the behind them, there are at least in our own portfolio, we have like 6 companies who are more than 20 million ARR, doubling each year. And we are seeing some seed companies growing 30% month on month. So the flow of new companies and the number of companies is so much. You will see this massive number of companies going to get listed. Once they start listing, just it will be a large number of those.
Shekhar, one question I have is that, with SaaS businesses, one interesting strength is that one big thing is that, the geography is not a limitation. So you can be in East Europe, you can be in Southeast Asia, wherever, and you can start. So that in itself makes this a very, very competitive landscape. And in that context, I want to, and, of course, pricing, so many things get determined, the talent that you get. In all this context where we will see SaaS companies coming out from anywhere, what do you think is particular to India, which gives us strength?
Yeah, excellent question, actually. So there has to be some core fundamental advantage for you to be setting up a company from India for the global market, right? So there are kind of two changes that has happened and is becoming obvious to everybody. One is the buying behavior of people have changed across the world. They all want to buy the best product. It doesn't matter where they are from. And they have an ability to compare thanks to cloud and thanks to freemium way of evaluating and piloting. They can evaluate products and buy the best. So let the best product win. That's the one change. Otherwise, India would have been always at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
The second one is the amount of service and support one can give. Companies that can take advantage of India cost to give a white glove service to a global customer who won't get treated the same way from a local vendor, because most of the vendors want to go for bigger customers.
Yeah.
Think of an SMB customer who wants to pay $100 per month. Even if you do one phone call from a local one, you lost your margins. But from India, if you say I will do 24/7 and be able to support, that is a phenomenal service. So in fact, I used to say, if Indian companies can do 2x the value at half the cost, 2x the value at half the cost, it's like water and water going towards gravity. You will win. One way or other, you just do this, you will win.
Yeah.
I think that's an advantage, we can take off. And we are seeing that, right? Out of, if you look at all our scale companies, up to 500 employees, most of them are in India. Then they start building, go-to-market functions in each of the regions. But center of gravity is still in India, and they're able to scale and lift product engineering, support, services. But what I cannot do from India, I do in each region. And that's a phenomenal advantage.
Yeah. To us becoming Atmanirbhar Bharat. Yes. Atmanirbhar SaaS Bharat.
SaaS Bharat.
Yes. You talked about earlier, you talked about the vast number of opportunities that are present in the SaaS space. But if I have to say, pick up one or two, which is very exciting to you right now.
So see, right now, post-COVID, it is phenomenal changes happen. Fundamentally, the buyers have changed how they used to buy. They have been introduced the power of digitization, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
so they want to move fast, and which means, you know, all the software so far has been built assuming that people are at one office, right? And maybe one or two branch offices. But now my office is working from home. So which means remote collaboration has a new meaning. Whatever
Yeah.
assumptions you made is completely has to change. What we are doing today in Zoom, now the same functionality has to go into every product, right? So, I should be able to go inside a product and be able to connect via video with my customer. How does that happen? So every new tool that has been there has to be retooled in the new world, and that is a massive opportunity. And we are going to be like, AirMeet is one of our company. We had invested just before pre-COVID. It just took off in terms of managing, the events, the all offline events, which is a probably, hundreds of billions of dollars industry, will go online right now. And even though post-COVID it may come offline, but people are not going to give online events, so it will happen. So the industry has changed overnight, and that's a massive opportunity. So what we call as the future of post-COVID era is a massive area. We are looking at every function, whether it's a sales, marketing, developers, how collaboration has to happen, how each person has to work, and how the work gets done, and how workflow has to happen is a massive area. And that's one. The second one we are always excited about, we have been looking at, is what we call as the digital health, and it has more meaning today in the COVID world than pre-COVID. So
Yeah.
we are aggressively looking at all AI ML for digital health and how they all can come together to solve the healthcare issues of the world.
Shekhar, I will be doing injustice if I don't ask you this question. You have so many ideas. You understand. You're like at the vantage point, at the cusp. All the words I can use, uh, have all the lens, in the trenches also to large extent with all these portfolio companies of yours. Why haven't you started a billion-dollar SaaS business?
Company. Yeah,
Yes, I
excellent
always
question.
think of this.
Excellent question. So I used to, I went to a PhD with my professor in US, and he used to tell me that the best professor is the one where every student makes more money than the professor. So I am of the opinion that now, before I got into investment, I was part of two successful startups, and both got exited, 250 million plus valuations. And being in the right place and right time in the valley, I learned a lot from that. So I chose to be an investor not by accident but by design, so that whatever I had learned as an operator, then I learned about as an investor and contribute back to working with the entrepreneurs. So I'm taking, I'm not chasing, money per se, but I'm chasing impact and value creation. And if I, in my career at Axel and as an investor, can create several, be part of a journey of several billion-dollar companies, that is a more fruitful experience, in my opinion, than me creating serially one at a time. So I have chosen this path.
Wow. Shekhar Kirani, thank you so much. And every entrepreneur in India in the SaaS space would be very proud that you've chosen this path because it helps
Thank you. And
so many of
all
them.
my learning is by interaction with them, and is an enriching experience. And thanks to everybody who has contributed to my learning. And I say that part. And my as you said, my vantage point is whatever I learned from Freshworks to ChargeBee, how do I take it to a younger company? Whatever I learned from the younger companies, go back and discuss with our larger companies, because sometimes they are growing fast and missing the trenches, what is
Mm.
happening, and bring some of those best of the learnings. And that's the job, at least we all have to kind of share and pick the right things for everywhere. Thank you for this opportunity, Shraddha, and it's great seeing you again after, I think, almost a few years. But at least I've been seeing you on the Zoom, and thank you for
Thank you.
this opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I am today joined by Puneet Chandok. He's the president of AWS India and South Asia. And I have to get it right that he oversees the incubation, which, you should also answer what that means. He oversees the incubation, planning, and demand for AWS services from customers across industry segments in India and South Asia. So over to you, Puneet.
Thank you, Shraddha. I'll attempt to answer the word incubation, but in simple words, my job is to bring the best of AWS to our customers in India and move AWS in India forward. But with that, folks, welcome. And thank you, Shraddha. I'm absolutely thrilled and excited to be hosting this conversation along with you today. And thank you to the incredible panel who's come with us and spending time with us. Quite honestly, and Shraddha, you know this, and you and I spoke about this, right? We are not short of these conversations. In fact, we're seeing more than our fair share of these virtual sessions today. It's almost like we have a pandemic of these online webinars. But with that context, I'm glad AWS and YourStory have come together, right? And we're trying to curate this series to truly differentiate the signal from the noise around us. And there's a lot of noise around us, right? And my attempt today and our attempt today should be to do three things. Three things differently today. One, let's deep dive into some real actionable learnings, right? Both from a business and a technology vantage point. Second, I think the intent here is to help our audience identify new ideas and opportunities, right? We're in the midst of unusual times, and times like these create more opportunities than ever, right? So I think we should have a discussion around that. And then third, let's also have a conversation around how to actually build and scale on these ideas. We all have enough ideas, but how do you really make them happen on the ground? And I can't think of a better topic than the SaaS ecosystem, which is one of the most exciting spaces in technology today. And I'm glad we're having this conversation.
Thanks, Puneet. Let me now introduce you the experts, the voices of Indian SaaS ecosystem who are with us today. So we have Bhaskar Subramaniam, co-founder Amagi, Milind Burate, co-founder Dhruva, Ankit Sobti, founder Postman, and Ankit is the latest entrant in the Unicorn Club and raising the flag high, not just in India, but across the world. So he's here today with us. Jayant Paleti, co-founder of Darwin Box. Anish Reddy, co-founder and CEO of Capillary. Again, a strong voice in the startup, in the SaaS ecosystem. You know, I want to ask all of you this question. How are you seeing, and picking from what Puneet said, in terms of the learnings for everyone who's watching this today, how are you seeing actually the SaaS ecosystem transform? And you know, the whole unicorn, because somewhere unicorn as a word is whatever symbolic, but it also means that the ecosystem is seeing large businesses being built. How do you see that the market shaping us for Indian SaaS businesses across the world? Ankit, you could start.
Right, definitely. So, you know what, like, I think SaaS has definitely had a bit of a reckoning, you know, over the last decade or so, right? We saw a lot of great companies come out in the SaaS ecosystem, Zoho and Freshworks. And of course, like, you know, we see these examples of Dhruva and Capillary, and even on the developer focus side, you have Bingify, Browser Stack, who've done actually really well, right? And I think, honestly speaking, as you mentioned, probably the newest entrant into this club, right, is that at every stage, the companies that precede you bear the possibilities of what has come on since then. And I feel like, you know, much like anything else, right, the challenges more often than not end up usually just being mental more than anything else. And the definition of what is possible expands a lot. It's like you see athletes breaking records, right? The 10-second barrier running, or even like climbing Everest, for example, right? Like once you know it's done, it becomes possible. And now more than ever, right? Like it is becoming more and more, you know, plausible for globally focused category creating companies to come out of India. Like for us, for example, when we started out about 6 years ago, it was very important to prove for us that great deep technology companies and products could be built out of India and have a global impact, given the fact that India has one of the largest developer communities in the world. And now you see companies that are discovering, you know, product-led growth strategies while relying on deep technology to solve some of the problems and simultaneously emphasizing on finesse or form and not just function. Right. And with this possibility being expanded more and more, I feel the ecosystem is now primed to only do more and better. And I think, like, you know, and I hope that more and more similar companies which are category creating, but also globally leading, come out of India and the Indian ecosystem.
Yeah, and Ankit, what you're also saying is also very symbolic again of the ambition of the Indian founders that, you know, it's like we are not any more second or third to what is happening in Silicon Valley. We should be dominating the space. And Anish, I would like to ask you, Capillary has been a very big name in the Indian SaaS ecosystem in our country. What do you have to say?
You know, I think, you know, in 2012, when a few of us got together and said, let's form iSpirit, right? So I remember they were probably 5 companies which were more than $2-3 million in ARR, right? So it's just amazing, when you look at it now, and there's probably at least 7-8 companies more than 25 million, or probably 10-15 companies more than 25 million. And the count of people who have crossed 1 million is probably, it must be a few hundred, right? So it's amazing to see the ecosystem bloom, right? So, and both sides, so of course there is an ecosystem which is focused on the West, which I think is done, it is done quite well. It's also been amazing to see, a lot of Asia focused SaaS also take off, whether it's us or whether it's a Clever Tap or a Mowing Age, or, we've Darwinbox, right? Jayant and team have done a great job there. So, I think, if you really ask me, I think that in the last 5-6 years, SaaS out of India has definitely bloomed, right? So I think the industry is probably, 100 times larger than it was just like 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, and Anish, I'm picking from what you said. I think it's entrepreneurs like you and all of you over here who are showing a lot of young entrepreneurs that this can be done and there is a business to be built. And like Ankit said, that every success that happens creates a lot more people now who know that they can be job creators. So yeah, thank you. Jayant?
I think I actually fundamentally echo Ankit's thoughts, right? I would probably be in the category of a job seeker if I hadn't seen so many companies get built before. And one should realize that when in the 2000s, when SaaS companies were getting built in India, when probably, for example, Sridhar Vembu started a cloud company when the word SaaS was not even coined. Right, and delivered SaaS globally. I think they had a much tough time. And when Anish started, Bhaskar started their companies in the 2000s, I think we were probably the youngest company in the set here. We started in 2015, 5 years ago. I think what gave us confidence to start in the first place was that you can build a great product company out of India, and it's been demonstrated enough number of times historically. I think was a major source of confidence. Right, and I think that security blanket that so many people have done it before, it's not going to, it's going to be a hard journey, but it's definitely possible. Was at least something that gives you confidence. And second, I think the other aspect of particularly the SaaS ecosystem that I noticed, I think the ecosystem is fairly tight. It is closely knit, and people are happy to help each other. And for example, we've benefited immensely from the counsel that Anish keeps giving us. At immensely, we've troubled him enough number of times. And there are so many more founders in the ecosystem who are always happy to share.
Thank you. That's a very powerful thinking, and yeah, all of you will make it come true. Milind, maybe if you could.
Yeah. So looking at from India perspective, right? So one thing that comes to mind is it had just become a level playing field. So earlier, say the Bay Area had that advantage, right? So be it VCs, be it the talent, be it the market, be it like availability to hardware. Now that has become a level playing field. And of course, the public cloud companies, that's like one big piece in there, right? So with SaaS now, you don't have to worry about your own hardware. And then all of a sudden, be it a startup in Bay Area, be it a startup in India, it's a level playing field. So that's one. Purely from India perspective, we had two skill sets, right? So historically, like last 30-40 years, we have the skill set and talent around software development, and we have the skill set and talent around service, right? And when software as a service comes into play, we have both an advantage and disadvantage, like from those perspectives. One, because we know software, we know service, essentially bringing it together, offering it as like one single solution to the customer becomes easier for us. We can actually think from that perspective. Disadvantage because so far we haven't really, or essentially when we're purely into consultancy business or whatever software services business, right? We have not paid enough attention to the end customer demand as such. So that's a skill set that we kind of still lack in India. We are like building it, but that's one skill set that we lack. So yes, India perspective, both like plus and minus from that perspective.
Thanks, Milind. Just want to understand from you, how have you seen the SaaS? You've been here, one of the big players in the ecosystem. Is that how have you seen the SaaS ecosystem evolve? And what are some of the opportunities that you're noticing now?
I think fundamentally, if you look at it, subscription economy itself is something of I think it's evolved over the last decade across the globe, and I think that's a very important thing. I don't think it is almost like compounding numbers, right? People don't get SaaS unless you really see the whole perception of how it grows, right? It just grows like a weed. Literally, it grows like a weed once it starts growing, and that's critical to be able to identify that sort of trend line. I think over the like I think all of them talked about. Largely, we've seen this whole ecosystem evolve, where we've seen these sort of companies grow, and we've seen them growing exponentially as a whole economy of what we've seen from a SaaS standpoint. I think that's been a great first step that we've seen as an Indian ecosystem. The second part, I think, truly is that I think in the 2000s, when we all were starting our first companies and things, the whole conversation was always that you have to be in the local market. You have to be in the market of choice to do things. And the moment we went into a B2B and SaaS sort of infrastructure, I think that boundaries have kind of gone away, largely thanks to obviously internet and the economy and how we're starting to work, but also because it's all software driven and it's more automation and integrations and programmatic in some fashion. Largely, we're seeing this whole boundaries getting broken down. It's good news for countries like India, which we've always been 12 hours away from a primary market like US or anywhere else, but suddenly these boundaries are getting broken down much faster in this decade than what it was in the earlier decades. Having said that, I think there's both an opportunity and a challenge going forward. Yes, I think Milind talked about the talent pool that we have, which I think is truly important. Having said that, when we talk about global marketplaces evolving, that essentially also means that this could be done in any country. It's not just about India. Wherever you're going to see Eastern Europe, you're going to see other countries also evolving, because the barriers to entry in a SaaS business, fundamentally, if you look at it, because the cost of serving, the cost of creation, and cost of marketing and sales, I think what Anish pointed out as a playbook today, is largely kind of democratizing the whole infrastructure. It was not like you need to be set in a particular pace. So you kind of democratize this whole capabilities in some sense. It's both an opportunity and a challenge as we move forward. I truly believe it's in a very early stage of SaaS adoption. I'm sure all of our markets will echo the same thing, is that we are at maybe ground or day zero, like what Bezos talks about. That's where we are as a whole ecosystem.
Puneet?
No, I'll first of all, I'm listening to this conversation. I'm just reevaluating life and career goals. I'm probably the only non-entrepreneur in this group. But the way I sleep well at night is I tell myself I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I get to learn from friends and colleagues like you. But let me. I love everything what you guys said, right? But I want to pick on two things. Jayant, you said India will become the most natural place in the world to build a SaaS company. Ankit, you said challenges are mental. It's about breaking barriers. It's about building globally leading category creating companies out of India. So let me kind of turn this on the head and ask you another question. What are the unique advantages today of building a SaaS company out of India? And the other part of this question is, as SaaS companies and startups start thinking about building a business out of India, should they think global from day one, or do you recommend a crawl, walk, run approach?
So I think in terms of advantages, right? Like I think Bhaskar very succinctly and correctly pointed out everything, right? Like I think apart from, having access to a great engineering talent pool, I have definitely seen over the last 5 to 6 years that, product and design thinking is definitely getting better. People are learning, and because the opportunities and the options of learning itself from globally distributed companies and from great companies within India itself, and for, as correctly mentioned before, with the ecosystem itself becoming more and more, closer together, that we end up learning from each other, that we see product and design thinking itself improving. The precedents that I've set have opened up the possibility. And then you have, now more and more companies adopting product-led growth strategy, which means that you can reach pretty much globally anybody in the world. And I mean, I'll take an example for Postman itself, right? Like we ran a very, very small sales team up until like very recently, and were pretty much selling enterprise licenses without having a sales team fundamentally. Right. So I think that opportunity, that options that opens up, right, is fairly immense. Now, to answer your second question, I guess I'll just preface it with a little story and then summarize, right? So Postman as a company itself was created about 6 years ago, but few people know that the product Postman existed for about 2.5 years before the company came into being. And we had massive traction, like even before we had the company, about 50,000 users in the first 6 months. And about 2014, when we thought about starting the company, we had about 300,000 users in more than 190 countries at that point in time. And we were solving, I mean, a real problem, and the people saw value in that. But that said, one thing that was very common as we were asking people around us, hey, we are building this. I know you use it. Will you pay for it? And one feedback that we very uniformly got at that point in time is, why will I pay for something like Postman when I can build this in a day? Now, when we started out this idea of exploring monetization, we put out this small in-app purchase in the product, and we shared it with the people around us, and got the exact same feedback. At that point in time, what we did was we instead then shared it with our community of 300, 400,000 people and just put it out there. And it took off. We saw companies, use the product, buy it, validated our hypothesis. And honestly, at that point in time, we stopped looking for or seeking geographically localized in-person feedback. I think it would be the way I put it, and started looking towards our own community, which of course was global.
So I would agree on Ankit's point, right? It probably depends on the product. So I would by default go with crawl, walk, run. So it doesn't mean that you have to start in India and then go global. You can actually start with your early adopter market, right? And that's something that you would figure out based on what are your marketing surveys or just your intuition. But start going there, make sure that you have solved their problem, and like grow from there and grow. But yeah, I agree with Ankit. There could be like some viral products out there where the requirements are like same across the globe, right? And in those cases, it may make sense to actually just go global from day one. Typical enterprise products, I would still say crawl, walk, run.
My view on that would be, look, I think just India as a market is, depends on what you want to build, right? If you're trying to build for value SaaS, or you're happy building a company with 5-10 million revenues, generating nice profits, that's good. Nothing wrong with it. I think India is a good enough market for that, but I would definitely say, if you want to go beyond 50 mil, 100 mil, you will find scale to be harder to come by in India. Whether it's, especially if you're doing SMB and, people don't pay. If you're doing, we're off late seeing a lot of enterprise moving to SaaS across India and Asia, right? We're seeing multiple, folks like the Tatas willing to pay a few $1 million a year to SaaS, so you start finally seeing that market change. But in spite of that, I do think it'll be at least 10 years before you can probably build a 100 million company just focused on India on SaaS. Right. So I do think, what I'm not saying is go from day one, go build for the world. But I do think when you're thinking of it, it's good to think of, making it multilingual. It's good to think of not building only for, India or very specific India use cases. Otherwise, what happens is, the third or fourth year when you want to do it, like we went through that, right? We didn't think so much about going international on day one. And then we spent, I think, an year and a half re-architecting the whole product to internationalization and, all that stuff, right? So just very painful. So I would, as an advice, I would definitely say, at least build for, the tech should be, stuff you build for multiple markets. Your GTMs can start, as you raise money and as you get to a place where, you feel you have the right time to go outside India or get into a newer market. If you're just doing US than doing any other country or any of that.
My own experience is that it completely depends on segment. Categories like developer tools, where best practices, context can be the same globally. I think you go wherever the early adopters are. We build HR software for enterprises. So in HR, oftentimes the local context matters. And we built a company where 90% of our ARR comes from India, 10% now from Southeast Asia. And for us, when we started out, it was all about identifying and because we were enterprise focused from the beginning, having to figure out enterprises locally that were willing to take a bet on you. And we are a system of record for a company, right? If there are 3 systems of record, there's a CRM, there's a HCM, there's a finance system of record. We're one of them. And maybe pushing enterprises to move from a legacy software that they've used for ages, like SAP, Oracle. It was, at least in the first 2 years of journey, very, very tough. So you have to identify those set of guys in the target geography that you have that will be open to maybe considering you, that are willing to take a punt on you. And for us, that was the internet ecosystem. When we started in 2015, the segment that was just about to take off at the juncture was internet. So I think we partnered with a bunch of great Indian internet companies. And we were able to build our product out before the traditional enterprises, the Tatas, the Mahindras, the Adanis, started sitting up and taking notice and saying, okay, you built a good platform. Okay, you seem to have a lot of customers. We're happy to consider you now. So, and my take on this is, there are segments where maybe the local context matters. And in those cases, maybe identify segments within that geography where you can go to market quickly and get early traction. But clearly, I think going to market quickly is very, very important, right? Rather than building out the product for a really, really long time. Right? You might as well just go out there and build what the market wants or client. That is important.
Got it. It was really interesting. What I'm hearing is conditions are right. The markets you serve depends on what segment, what is the problem that you're trying to solve for, your ambition, the ability to localize the GTM. But let me ask this differently, right? In India today, and Shraddha, you said this at the start, right? India today has seen the emergence of 6 SaaS unicorns and many, many more to come, if I go back to the Rajan conversation. But if you think about the mindset of Indian SaaS companies, right? What do you think needs to change for companies, more and more companies, SaaS companies out of India to scale up?
I think, and again, I'll go first, maybe just to kind of give you a perspective from our end. I think we made a lot of mistakes. I think more mistakes than what Anish should have even imagined, I guess. So we started off in India, literally, right? So the fundamental challenge was, again, we were slightly patriotic, thinking India is going to be the first market that we're going to address. And again, we are in a vertical SaaS. So we're not a horizontal SaaS company. We have SaaS primarily for media companies in the media technology space, very, very niche in that sense of the word. And I think the biggest learning that we had, I think we were slightly masochist in terms of how we were approaching the GTM in some sense, is start with markets which are ready to adopt it and is ready from a maturity standpoint, both for us, because media meant that the infrastructure existed for streaming content seamlessly across the internet. So there is the core feature set that needed and a mindset of customers who are ready to really move. What we found out is that's what we found in the US eventually, where it started to work for us. But I think we took a long time to kind of wade through this whole market space to kind of get to that point of starting to do that. So I would recommend anybody to start with a lazy market which is ready to adopt it faster. Don't go with a kind of a mindset of, because I don't think cost to GTM is going to be a big challenge at all. For most SaaS businesses, it's a small part, and I think I'm sure a lot of us would talk about, if you look at CAC to LTV ratios, I'm sure a lot of us we seeing, at least in the kind of a vertical SaaS where we are, our cost of sales is extremely low when compared to the sort of lifetime value that you can actually accretively get from enterprises today. I think we should be able to leverage that meaningfully and effectively.
So I think the first thing that I definitely focus on is this, in terms of the mindset, right, is the desire to build best-in-class products globally. I honestly, strongly believe that there is enough great talent in India, which is constantly getting better because the learning opportunity has just expanded, right? And at least, I mean, that's how we grew, both as, as a company and more importantly, also as founders, by keeping things very simple, by focusing on first principles thinking and learning from the best-in-class companies and their playbooks. Sometimes you find them documented, sometimes you have to go and ask. And I think the asking thing is what you realize in the whole world, people are open to talking to you if you just go and find the people, but simultaneously adapting them to your own unique context, right? And I guess very strongly, the other thing that you believe in is that with best-in-class products also comes best-in-class pricing, and that is what the validation of that thing ends up being. The second point I would probably put in, which I referred to earlier, is the product-led growth. And I mean, we have personally found product-led growth strategies to be far more scalable than sales and marketing strategies. These are, heavily data-driven, full of experimentation at scale, globally scalable, and also we find them to be more sustainable. And when done well, you are able to generate values for your customers and symbiotically also for your own company.
So taking a cue from Ankit again, right? So very good point that he raised around essentially chasing the value, not the valuation, and more than that, like focusing on the problem and not on the solution, right? So that's something that Indian SaaS companies could again do in terms of understanding what's the real problem of the market and not really focusing on the tech side of things, right? And then again, depends on the segment, but the go-to-market part of it, right? Be it like market analysis, be it marketing, be it the sales motion, and then scaling it out. So scaling out development is something that we do understand to a large extent, but scaling out your GTM motion is something that Indian SaaS companies could focus on. Especially, we're looking at if you're looking at getting more unicorns coming out of India.
Interesting. I love the different point of views, right? And how do you define the market? What problem are you really solving? Are you chasing value or valuation? Are you creating a boring market, replacing something, or creating something completely new? And how you build, right? So thank you. Really interesting point of views. Back to you, Shraddha.
So I want to ask all of you, and all of you have raised money, and all of you have marched to the, not marched to the tunes, but answered some of the questions which are very important when you are raising significant capital. What do you think should SaaS companies who are building now should do when they have to attract good capital? And is VC investment the only alternative, or do you think there are some other options that they should be exploring? Ankit, I have to ask you. Let's begin with you. You're like, you've raised money and how? So let's start with you.
Got it. So yeah, it's an interesting question because I think, being a founder at one company means that I have one point of view at this point in time on what has worked for us, right?
Yeah.
But honestly, I mean, I think it's been documented before. I know this was covered on your show as well, that we have never proactively fundraised ever, like across all of the rounds that we have raised. And, which also means that disproportionately, we have spent a far lesser amount of energy fundraising, right? And for us, it always came down to traction, to finding that usage, that market, that interest, right? Even though it was not a business, I would say, that was, attractive to investors, it was always the opportunity, an opportunity that was growing simultaneously along with the growth of the company, especially in the API ecosystem. And that is what people saw. And they saw the traction that we had. And we have, I think, always come down to the point that if you are solving for a real problem and you need to validate whether you're doing that as quickly as possible, and if the solution itself has value, then traction follows. And what follows traction is VCs, right? So that's been our playbook pretty much from that perspective, right? So I mean, I also feel like from a DNA perspective for both Abhinav and myself is that we have never been really good at selling ourselves in a way. So I think the traction is, which is why we would probably have never been very good at fundraising, but we've always been good at, or at least decent at, building products. And that is what the strategy that's worked for us.
Yeah, but you're definitely saying that traction is a strong moat to attract investors, to get investors. Anish?
Right. I have a, we raised, again, our first, our Series A, our Angel, both happened, Series A, Series B, and Angel happened with inbound investors. Series C, I was doing acquisition, so we had to go out. But I think so. We had so this was early days, right? Like we didn't know of SaaS when we set up Capillary, to be honest, right? So we didn't know of Salesforce and all that stuff, right? So the trick that we would do is, someone had told us, look, take one investor meeting a week. Like just instead of piling this onto like a point where you are really now in the market to raise funds. Do it casually, spend like 1 hour a week. Investors are smart people, right? So you must give it to them. They are smart people. They ask the right questions as well. So we would just do that, right? So we would keep, if I was in Bombay, someone mailed in, I would say, yeah, okay, let's meet this guy, right? So, and what worked well for us, and we were written off, right? India-focused software company, like who's built a software company out of India, right? And focused on India, right? So like, it's not done. And what I think helped us was as people saw us grow, they got more interested, right? So the first 1 lakh of revenue we got, we were like, okay. Then, you got to like, $1 million of ARR, people like, yeah, this looks like something serious is happening here now. And when the same guys saw you getting to 8-9 million, they're like, yeah, I think we can put a 40-50 million check now, right? So So I would break this down. I think the mistake that a lot of us do is, we try and pile this on into a big fundraise and, spend 6 months trying to raise money. And it's a total waste of time, right? So I think the model that at least worked for me, Shraddha, is keeping in touch, and every 6 months you give an update, people see you're moving ahead, and then when you want to raise a fund, it's actually 5-6 phone calls, so it's just calling people up and saying, look, we're going to raise, are you interested? And the first 3 times, all the times we had this case of, 4 out of 5 saying, yes, we are interested, and your fundraise is like done in a month or a month and a half. Right. So that's at least what worked for us. So I think showing continuous progress is probably, what I would kind of suggest.
Yeah, like you said, investors are very smart people, so they can smell continuous progress very quickly. True, very, very true. Milind?
I agree with Anish, right? The investor relationship is important. So maintaining that relationship even when you're not really actively raising, that's important. But I differ with Anish and Ankit both on the need for raising VC money, right? So again, if I look at some of the Bay Area startups and the speed at which they scale versus the speed at which, say, Indian SaaS startups scale today, I think there is a difference. Essentially, a Bay Area startup, what they could achieve, say, in a 3 to 5 year time frame, Indian startup would probably take 5 to 10 years to achieve that, primarily because we think a little more organic than the Bay Area startups who are like thinking very inorganic. They would just raise money, make a lot of splash in marketing, right? Make sure that there's a big development team, build the product faster. So time is of importance, right? So sometimes we are lucky that, yeah, we kind of, with our dedication and focus, we can actually build something that's like a market leading product. But if there is competition in the market, it becomes crucial that you move faster. And yeah, VC money certainly helps kind of grow inorganically much faster.
Thanks, Milind. I think this is a deep conversation in itself. We should go, but we don't have time. But I think there's so many nuances to what you're saying right now. But yeah, Bhaskar and Jayant, would love to hear from you.
Now, from my view, I think, again, I think like Anish, we started very early. I don't think people understood SaaS or what's happening. So I'll leave that out for a moment, right? If you look at current investors, I think they're fairly clear. And I think what Ankit says, I would voice the same thing, is basically if there is traction, if there's value, SaaS is typically a very cost-effective business when you start off with, because for you to get traction, I don't think you need boatloads of money to start with what it is. I think scale is where the money is needed largely. So if you're able to demonstrate traction, even in a small ecosystem of how that works and how the whole model and the subscription model starting to work, I think that's a critical first step. I would urge any entrepreneur, and I think we've gone through the mistakes of doing that, of raising money too early, for where either investors are not clear or we are not clear on the value. Doesn't make sense to really raise money and try to address it. You raise it the moment you have the traction. So minimize and optimize yourself to a point where you're able to get to traction, then go back and get scale money. And I think I would, what Milind's talking about in terms of scale, clearly, if you look at it, timelines of how fast you want to scale. I think one of the things, Bain, like we all think is, okay, growing twice over seems to be a high growth. It is not. Technically in SaaS, it could be, we're talking about growth rates measured in months, not in years, right? So it's like, that's the sort of speed at which these markets are actually transforming across the globe. Some of us are obviously lucky. If you're in the right place, right time, we just kind of take off. But there are markets which we need to be able to create in terms of sales and marketing spends. If you look at it, large part of SaaS is really sales and marketing. Once the product is done, it's really be able to kind of, how do you cookie cutter model, kind of trying to drive that traction in some sense, right? So scaling needs money, but I think fundamentally till traction, you need to be as optimized as possible, because cost of development is not really high in the early days to get to traction. Beyond that, a lot more investments to get into it. That would be my recommendation, the way it is today in terms of how the market is looking.
Thanks, Bhaskar.
I think most points have anyway gotten covered. The only thing that I can say is, I think as a segment now, SaaS is extremely well understood. I think business model wise, value wise, it's a business that at many levels, fundamentally, from a finance fundamentals point of view, probably is making sense. I think which is why I think as a segment now, there's a lot of interest. And I was speaking to somebody on our board last week, and he said, growth is directly proportional to the quantum of interest that you get from a VC. Growth, right? And pretty much what Bhaskar and Ankit echoed, also traction. And if you're growing, that means that you're solving a problem at some level. And automatically, because the segment is now so well understood, maybe even 5 years ago when we started, right, the number of funds that were doing SaaS was limited. Now, every fund has a SaaS mandate in India. Every VC has a SaaS mandate. So everybody is looking to deploy. It's just about finding the right company or idea to back. The other point that I wanted to make that was supremely helpful for us was raising money helped us in several ways. One, of course, a great counsel that you get from people on the board who've seen any number of stories like yours, any number of times globally. And there's that accumulated institutional wisdom that you, especially if you raise it from a good fund, who've seen this probably before in the Valley or any other place, any number of places before. That counsel helps, and that becomes more data for you to figure out your own strategy going forward. But the second way that it was helpful for us was it just gives more confidence to the target market that you're selling to. If you're selling something, if you're selling software where fundamental, very core operations for a company get managed, right? And if you're not backed by, meaning if you have a little revenue, you're not backed by good investors, there's also always a doubt in a company's mind or in a customer's mind. If I'm running such critical infrastructure on this platform, will it survive? Even if I don't like an SAP or Oracle, I will still work with them, right? Because I know that they will survive. They've been around for the last 30 years. They'll be around for the next 30. So I think just so that a customer also gets confidence, that could be one other reason why you raise money.
Okay, so I'm summing up very interesting points, and I'm hoping everyone who will watch this will find it extremely valuable, because as we know, there are so many companies starting up. We had the number that in May, June, July, there are 220 startups which we tracked for our Tech 30 and these are primarily enterprise and SaaS startups which started this year itself. And I hope this is very useful for them. So two things: traction is important, and you should look at that. And as Anish said, that continuous, updates, continuous improvements that you're making, growth that you're seeing, keep updating, and that also helps. So so thank you. These are very valuable points. Now, my question to all of you and family, Anish, if you could begin on this, what are some key disadvantages that SaaS companies face, and what should they look at from the early days, be aware of, be cognizant of as they start?
Well, I think two, three good learnings there, Shraddha, for me. One is, just given that SaaS is a per unit model, right? So I've seen, some other companies who had, kind of started up. You go to a marketing manager and they say, okay, I'll buy one license, I'll install in one store, and it never scales, right? So you get some very nice logos, but people are just using you in one store, two store, three stores. And you're really thinking that, look, I've actually got adoption, right? Like the biggest of the brands are working with me. And you get fooled into, kind of satisfying this KRE of a marketing manager of saying, I'm doing something new. And because it's at like almost free or at very little cost, right? So it never scales, right? So I do think with SaaS, the problem is you can see adoption, but you're probably not adding real value. If you're especially not seeing adoption across the entire enterprise, or you're not seeing it scale fully, right? And I've seen a few startups, over the years get to very good brands, but not survive after that, because it was never really, it was a shiny object and not really a value solving thing, right? If you get what I'm saying, that's one. The second is, I think like we did this mistake, right? We were very early to SaaS and we said, look, we'll charge every month. We'll do a monthly charge. And I regret that decision. Like once you get into a monthly contract, you're going to like go crazy before you can move to a quarterly and then half yearly. And if you look at most of these US focused plays, it's SaaS sold like enterprise software. 5 year, no lock, no chance to get out of it, and you pay yearly upfront. It's just beautiful, right?
Thanks, Anish. Anyone wants to add? Puneet, you have access and you are right there looking at all kinds of companies, right? And I have to quote this, that you've said that organizations today need to have a digital roadmap that focuses on days and weeks, and we heard that today, and not months and years. From your vantage point at AWS, and you are seeing all companies, all of us are on AWS. What are some of the things that you're seeing companies are doing, and especially how are you seeing them work with SaaS companies?
Shraddha, there's a lot changing around us, right? But there are three things that at least I'm most curious about. And the first one is, and again, I'm going to talk more from an enterprise vantage point. You guys are far deeper in technology than I am when it comes to SaaS. But when you think about the value proposition of technology and digital for enterprises or conventional businesses in a market like India, the proposition has never been clearer, right? And I talk to customers every day, and there's a clear realization today that businesses that were thinking deeply about technology and cloud are going to come out of this crisis much stronger, right? And that to me is just a really interesting shift that I've seen in the last 6-7 months. I haven't seen this in the last 20 years in India. And cloud gives you that necessary agility to respond to a crisis like what we're seeing today, right? And digital roadmaps, and I've built digital roadmaps for a living for 20 years. They typically used to be a tick in the box for large companies, and they used to run into quarters and years in the pre-COVID world. Today, they now are a question of survival, right? And they're now being measured and delivered in days and weeks, which is a terrific shift. The other thing that's happened is, which is relevant to the SaaS companies, is we always were moving towards this era of a virtual business, but that move has been accentuated much more than ever before. You can literally now build a business from anywhere in the world. You can hire virtually, you can collaborate, you can sell virtually, you can deliver, and you can support virtually, right? And look at SaaS companies coming out of India, all our colleagues here today, right? It's just a compelling example of this. And remote engagements now becoming the norm. And again, we always had this mental block, and we've all been selling for a while, right? That you can't sell digitally. It's all relationship based, but that's changed. We're all now selling digitally. So you, for example, for all our friends out here today, you might not need a large sales organization in markets like US and UK or whichever markets you're going to. You can serve customers from India once they get used to the remote way of selling, which is again a really interesting unlock. And then the third one, which is again core to what we do at AWS, right? This is real democratization of technology driven by the cloud. Any of us today sitting in a Starbucks or our homes or wherever we are have access to as much compute and storage and analytics and any technology that we want at a click of a button, metered as somebody said. And this is the kind of access that large corporations used to have with millions of dollars of budgets and armies of people, right? And today you and I have that sitting in a Starbucks. If you bring these three together, there's a massive unlock, right? It's a massive unlock. And I will I'll disagree with the point that was made, Anish, and pretty much everybody disagreed with you. So I'm going to do this, but it's fun. I get to learn when I disagree with you. But the SME market is an example, right? You said it's a tough market, and I realize it's probably one of the toughest markets out there. But if I look at what we're trying to do in India, quite honestly, it today represents the world's largest open market for technology companies to serve, right? And we're seeing a massive unlock in the last 6 or 7 months. We're seeing this generation of digital SMBs come about, and they're adopting technology like we've never seen them adopt. And I'll give you an example. We launched this really interesting AWS Digital Suite bundle, where we got 3 SaaS companies together. And these are basically CRM, HR, customer messaging software, and payment solutions. We bundle them. We're trying to sell them on Amazon.in. And the uptick that we've seen in the past few months has been incredible. We never thought we could sell technology like we're selling, bundling it, simplifying it. I've always believed the S in SMB stands for simple. And if you can simplify this, bundle this, bring it to a price point, and then get the reach and access, it's a massive opportunity to serve. So that's what I'm picking up, Shraddha.
Thanks, Puneet, because I think it's true, right? We kept on saying digital India, but we kept on saying digital India. But now it's happened, like there's such a significant shift in the last few months. Like really, like finally, something big is happening in this country when it comes to digital adoption. Puneet, now over to you.
I'm going to go to Jayant. And Jayant, I love what you guys are doing with Darwinbox. And I don't know if you agreed with what I said around the shifts that I'm seeing, but from your vantage point, right? How are you seeing digital transformation? And let's talk about HRMS for a minute as well, right? How are you thinking about building HRMS solutions, irrespective of the size of the customers you serve, and taking this to market?
One, I think if anything, right, especially in the target geographies that we serve, which is India, Southeast Asia, historically, there's always this worry about still having to sell the idea of migration to the cloud, right? Still having to sell the idea of actually digital. I think that ship has sailed now. I'm very, very clear that the importance of being digital is extremely well understood. Even the most traditional of companies, even the most traditional of functions, coming back to us and saying, now we understand why we have to do this. Tell us how. And I think that 3-4 years worth of shift in thinking has happened over the last 6 months. I think that much is very, very clear. And from a, again, like I said, from a HR point of view, because it is the first set of things that a company wants to digitize, right? And you realize that beyond 100 employees, beyond 200, beyond 300, beyond 500, just becomes impossible to manage things on an Excel sheet. So it starts making sense for a company to maybe do this journey. But importantly, Puneet, I mean, like I said, very noble that you said, that I want to go after this entire large segment. But for us, like I said, it became very clear for us that, especially at our stage of journey, it's important to maybe focus on segments where the acceptance for a product like ours is very well understood, which is why we've designed and built our product a certain way. And especially, like I said, when we started 2015, 16, the cloud was emerging in India. So at that juncture, we decided that enterprise and mid-market is where we are going to focus. And in a lot of ways, the product got built out in a manner that it serves that segment well. So it might seem slightly complicated for a small company. But like I said, very noble. And I think, and you're right, at some juncture, given maybe the right stage of the company, it's something that all of us would love to do, right? Meaning, if you're able to give back in some form, help in nation building or enable nation building in some way, like you're focused on doing, is great. But like I said, at our stage of journey, important to focus, pick the problems, segments that you want to go after, and
No, you're bang on. I think you're absolutely bang on, Jayant. And two things that you said resonated with me. One, I think, till a year or two ago, right, getting customers to understand, some old businesses to understand cloud was almost like changing religion, right? It was that difficult a conversation. Now it's a very simple conversation, right? And I tell my teams, right, you got to just show up now, right? It is clearer than ever, right? It just, and shame on me and us if we can't go and get our customers to see the value now. The other thing that you said, I completely agree with you, right? I think the SMB market, and I was just giving that as an example, given just the unlocks we've seen in the last 6-9 months and the adoption we're seeing. Absolutely, you have to pick your battles. You have to, it's a journey, it's an evolution. You have to see what works based on the product market fit and what you're building. And absolutely agree with both you and Anish on this, right? You have to be clear what makes sense at what stage. Let me change gears a little bit and talk about technology. And again, I'll put this question to all of you, and anybody who has a point of view should come in, right? Each SaaS company, no doubt, has unique advantages and unique needs, right, when it comes to technology choices. But there are several common technical choices that SaaS companies leverage today, right? And give us some examples, give us some ideas around how you're thinking about technology, how are you thinking about technology to scale up and make sure that your productivity and your developer productivity continues to go up.
Okay, I think I can go with a very quick point here. So I think for us, at least, like what we have seen and what we've seen a lot of companies do as well that use Postman is just an increased reliance on, obviously cloud providers, I guess, like AWS, but I think more recently on SaaS providers. And we have seen a lot of companies take technical decisions, including ourselves, where you keep an eye on what your core competitive advantage and what is the core value that you are providing to your customers while structurally and programmatically outsourcing the rest, if I put it that way, using APIs and SaaS, so that you don't need to reinvent the whole world. Like, for example, if I have to process payments right now, for us to be let's say for us, we collect payments from 180 plus countries right now. And for us to be able to do that, we don't have to build an entire billing organization to do that. We use something like Stripe, for example, to accomplish that, right? So that choosing between build versus buy at any point in time helps us prioritize and continually focus on the core capabilities that your organization has to provide.
I completely agree with Ankit on that, right? So just focus on your core business value and then outsource the rest, like either whatever the platform is providing you or some open source software or some other service, right? And then apart from that, one other point I will bring to the table is the scale out part of it. So you talked about scale up. Maybe it's like a slip of tongue, but scale out is the right term, right? So making sure that as the load on your system grows, you can just stand up more machines, stand up more storage, whatever is required, and like elastically scale it down when the load goes down. And that's primarily important for the cost part of it, especially if your organization or whatever your pricing is kind of COGS based, right? A lot of whatever your gross margins, that depends on the cost that you pay for the infrastructure. Then it becomes important that you kind of build a scale out tech rather than build something that is very static.
And I think, by the way, like just to add to that, right, I think it's quite insane that, some, like at least I'll speak from Postman's perspective, that something like this can come up in the last 6 years. And, Postman at this point in time is using like 500,000 organizations around the world, right? Like the fact that we have been able to scale up to this point in such a short period of time is almost impossible if you don't build up on what others have built, right? And that's where the true value addition comes in of SaaS, of APIs, and obviously of, if we were talking about this 5 years ago, we would have definitely, infrastructure as a service would be the conversation we would have been having as well. But that's by definition now, right? So it's very as obvious as anything else.
Absolutely. Back to you, Shraddha.
Now I have to ask all of you, and again, this is for all the entrepreneurs, people who are planning to start up, and everyone who's looking at this space. If you had to say, post-pandemic world that we are living in, where we've seen, now of course it's a rhetoric to say this, but unprecedented growth in digital adoption, like never before. What are some of the opportunities that you think have presented and people should look at as in the SaaS space? What are some of the opportunities which you think could be picked up?
Don't know. I see opportunities everywhere. And again, that's a very geocentric statement to make in some sense. Given all the markets are transforming, there are quite a few problems. I don't think any one specific domain or a business is changing, right? Given the digital transformation, the digital uptake that's happening across the industry, I think there's change happening. One interesting lateral thought I've been looking at, I think, which is very similar to what I think Milind and Ankit's talked about, is we are all starting to build on other SaaS services. So what I call it is like a meta SaaS infrastructure. I think there's also need for a meta SaaS platform. And what I mean by that is something about like an operating system for SaaS, which allows us to easily integrate a full workflow together. I think even today, we kind of pick and choose, create, yes, all of us have some sort of an API interfaces or programmatic interfaces. But I think there is thought process there. Maybe there's a lot of opportunities there of providing a meta SaaS platform, which will allow us to kind of have all the SaaS entities to be put together and create a cohesive experience, for example. But again, these are all really trend lines that I would personally look at and probably be interesting to explore going forward, for example.
They're like, I think we ourselves use like about 2 or 3 different services, which actually act as meta SaaS layer, because I remember speaking with someone that Slack, for example, used 2 years ago, or about a year ago, 700 plus different SaaS services. When I heard that statement, I audited how much we do, and we ourselves at this point probably use like 100 plus SaaS services at any point in time.
From all of you, Anish, if you could share, something, because this will be very useful. How are you working in this remote environment and with lean teams? Like, how are you working effectively, doing things effectively, and something that is working for you, which everyone can learn from?
I think the pandemic has obviously, made all of us think very differently on, how we collaborate and some of that, right? So some learnings on our side have been on the employee burnout side, right? So, what happened is, earlier there was this, I go to office, I work, I come back, right? In some senses. And today you don't have that. So you get into a room and then you're there till like 8, 9 in the evening and all that. Right? So we've done a few, and again, like most of the folks here, I'm guessing a lot of our employees are also bachelors and, our, first 5, 6 years of college and stuff. So we've done a few things. We've said, look, about 65, 70% of our employees now actually work from their hometowns. Right. So we said, look, we just said, look, just go back in May 15th, we said till November 15th, we're not coming back to office. So if you want to go back home, go back. Right. So, and then the usual stuff, $100 for setting up a home office and stuff. We also moved to this thing now where every 6 weeks we take a company shutdown. Right, so it's 4 days that we give off for everyone. Right, so it's called a company shutdown. We tell our customers, we tell everyone that look. So it's the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Right, 4 days. So so you can really switch off. Right, so I do think and I do think some of that has helped. But it's still, there was about 15% of employees who said we want to come back to office and work, right? So there is that trend of people saying, look, this is not working for us. So I think it's an evolving time, right? But I do think, and what we've seen is because of these shutdowns, we're seeing good productivity for the next 2-3 weeks after that, so it's kind of worked quite nicely for us. In fact, we started with one shutdown and we now do it every 6 weeks, right? So I think that's a quick COVID hack for us.
Yeah.
So for us, I think largely, if you kind of take a contra view to the water cooler conversations, right? As a company, as we grew, I think the fundamental challenge was a lot of things was spoken. People used to speak and design documents never existed, right? So a lot of times it's about two engineers coming to a room and then writing on a board. I think video conferencing and it's a very inferior alternative to face-to-face, which is good because it actually forced a lot of different cultural aspects. People started documenting it because it's much more easier to communicate. They just couldn't use the same mechanism of face-to-face. In some sense, that brought in a lot of discipline in terms of how people started thinking. That also meant obviously very efficient meetings. I think all of us would agree that meetings start on time and end on time as to the clock, literally, right? So which is like an extremely impossible thing to think of in an office environment. At least in India, I've not seen that happening in our company, at least, right? So never a 10 o'clock meeting starts at 10 o'clock, but at 10:05, right? So these are some of the real cultural changes, and I think it's just, I don't think anybody forced it. I think just people got into this stuff. But the biggest challenge, I think, like what Anish talked about, is also a challenge of, I think for post-March, it was extremely efficient. For the next 60 days, we saw super efficiency in some sense. But after that, there was a lot of burnout. And burnout in terms of two aspects. One is there were communication gaps. New ideas start to really stop, right? We're not talking about new ideas. There's no water cooler here, literally. You're talking to a tactical point, you're finishing your meetings, going back. You're not seeing new ideas generation in some sense. I truly believe, and again, like what Anish talked about, we, for example, have taken a decision that people will work from tier 2 towns forever. There's no reason to come back. And we wanted to have a kind of a physical sort of a model where maybe 3-4 days a month, people come to office and pretty much we'll make them fly down to office from anywhere across India or across the globe, literally, and then kind of move them back again. So we kind of are looking to get into a guest house environments here rather than actually offices. So we want to kind of shrink offices, but actually get guest houses and where people can come in and possibly only have an all hands every 45 days where everybody comes in and has a good time and goes back. So kind of part physical, part sort of a complete remote sort of environment is what we're exploring. Challenge has been onboarding new people. That's, I think, all of us, it's a big challenge because people are not seeing you. Culture is a big challenge, right? So those are things that we're trying to really inculcate.
Puneet, if you over to you. I think we're coming towards the closure now. Yeah.
I love the ideas, Anish, especially the company shutdown. I'd heard Dream 11 used to do something like this, which is where they used to shut down the systems and email for one of their employees for a week. And that also allowed them to test their resilience and can they really operate without, but I love what you guys are doing. Listen, I think we've had a wonderful conversation. I've learned a lot. I've been taking notes throughout. So thank you for all the input. At least I'm walking away with 2 or 3 things. One, I think the time is now to think deeply about technology and innovation and ideas and businesses. And we're already giving Darwin Box some ideas for product features, which is fantastic.
You get some idea, I hope.
I know, deserve something. But the biggest innovations really always come out when times are tough and times are difficult, because that really allows us to think differently. And times can't be tougher or weirder than what they are right now. So I'm hopeful we'll all walk away with some ideas, and people who are listening will walk away with some ideas. And with the power of technology today, right? We spoke about democratization of technology. We spoke about all the new things that all of you are doing, and the level playing field that is now kind of come together. I think none of us should waste this crisis. We should do a lot more. With that, thank you, folks. It was wonderful. It was a fantastic conversation. Thank you for all the input.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And you know, I have to, before we leave, I have to say that the biggest takeaway from this conversation is, and somewhere I don't think so we appreciate as much, but we have to, is that, you know, we have one of the most resilient, again, I don't want to sound very narcissistic about being an Indian, but we have some of the very resilient entrepreneurs and ambitious entrepreneurs and unapologetic entrepreneurs. And somewhere we just have to say that, yeah, our time is, like Puneet is saying, our time is now. And I you know, I took one very important thing which I want to say for everyone who will be watching this, is that we, you know, it's made in India, but made in India now for all the world, for everywhere in the world. And don't look at only localized geographic feedback, because the feedback can come from everywhere. So with that, thank you so much. Very insightful, very nuanced, and very deep conversation. And you know, it's important to recognize that all of you took time to come here and talk. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you very
We
much.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shraddha, for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Puneet.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.